All right, it is officially 9 o'clock. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to our cybersecurity best practices webinar. I'm sure we'll have a few more people joining as their alarms are going off to remind them of this very important and timely webinar that we have on cybersecurity best practices. I know some of you, I see a lot of names out there that are familiar. I see some new names. So if you've been here before, welcome. If you're new, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Um, So that's me. I'm Jeremy Cherney. And some of you have been to this webinar before or a variation of it, and maybe you're listening intently. Maybe you're kind of listening with one ear as you're doing something else. That's all fine, but I encourage you to listen to it newly. Listen to it like you've never heard it before, and get on the edge of your seat here because we're going to have a roller coaster of a learnings here about cybersecurity. You're going to learn about the risks that are out there, because that's really important. There's a lot of people that really minimize the risk in some ways or overstate the risk in other ways, and may not really be dealing with security. They want to be dealing with it. We're going to talk about some ways to mitigate that, some of the challenges you've got. And certainly if you've got some Q&A along the way, feel free to drop it in the chat. Hi, James, welcome. And just popped open my chat. So you can drop questions in there, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A as well, or if there's something you want to reach me about afterwards, you'll have my contact information. So let's jump in more into security. And what are we even talking about with security? When we talk about security, all things come to mind, right? You think of the hackers. Yes, Denny, there will be a webinar recording. And by the way, Amanda's on the call as well. Amanda is a co-host for this presentation, and so she may jump in and answer some of your questions or help you out in other ways. So around security, it's really around three different categories that we look at, and it's fun and conveniently named CIA, a CIA triad. It is the confidentiality of your data, the integrity of your data, and the availability of your data. So confidentiality is, you have data, and that you've got data that is fine for everybody to see. And you've got data that is only meant to be seen by certain people, either inside your organization or with your clients or with your business partners or with whomever. Anyone else that gets that data that's not supposed to have it, that would be a breach in confidentiality. And that could come in a lot of different ways. Integrity is when your data is changed in some way. It could be corrupted due to a hardware issue or a misconfiguration or something like that. It could also be that someone actually went in and changed your information. So like you could be sending somebody a contract, for example, and if someone in the middle intercepted that contract and changed the terms of the contract, that would be a violation of integrity, a breach of integrity, or someone who doesn't have access to payroll information gets access to their payroll information and changes it. Lastly is availability. People don't always think about this, but it really is a critical thing because this is the thing that irritates people the most in some ways, is when the systems aren't up and running. And they could be not up and running because of the hacker, but they could be not up and running because of the storm, the power, the flood, the dead motherboard, all the different things that can be out that can be causing you availability issues. So everything we're talking about, and you're going to, as you're going through this and hearing these things, start to map this onto your life at work and even your life at home. It's fine too, because it works there too, because we have security at home we care about. We've got our personal information. So this stuff works in both places. But start to think about, what are those areas that are important to you? What are those areas you want to protect? Don't worry about not even get into whether they are protected or not. But just when you think about what matters to you, what are the areas you want your attention on to really know for yourself what your risk is? And think about that a bit as we go through today's presentation. In the news, this is just not getting any better. It's just getting worse. There is just more and more attacks. I guess in one area, I heard it did get a little better in some of the attacks where people are accessing your banking information and that. The banks have finally gotten their act together with better security, and Microsoft has sunsetted their old version of Internet Explorer, which was often used as part of the attack. And a lot of those attacks have gone down. So there's a little bright news. So we'll call that out and, call a little sunshine when we see it. But by and large, there's a lot of bad news out there, and it's just getting worse. It's getting worse in so many ways from all aspects of that CIA triad. But you look, these are companies with big budgets, and they're getting hit. These are people that have full-time IT staffs, and they're getting hit, and they're paying big ransoms. Ransomware is a big component of this. That's one of the things people really worry about. If you're getting cybersecurity insurance renewals and they're coming in asking for a lot more premium, in part it's because of what the payouts they've been doing around ransomware and other types of security breaches. It's just not getting any better. So, and it is constant. One of the things, at Tobin we do is we provide managed security services, and those costs have gone up, not only in terms of the technologies, but the cost to manage it and all that. I just want to kind of point these out, just, alerting. This picture on the left is my email from, I think it was between March 13th and March 19th. So it came earlier this week, I think. And this is a list of a spreadsheet I get from a company called Qualys that lists all the new vulnerabilities that are discovered and then entered into this database called the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures Database. And you get a CVE number. So this is just a snapshot. I would be scrolling here for a while if I was scrolling through the list. That spreadsheet that's attached, that's the same list, has 957 rows in it. And those are just latest vulnerabilities added last week. Now, that doesn't mean those vulnerabilities were just discovered last week. These could be vulnerabilities that have been in the system for years, and they're only now known and made public and known publicly. That's the actual other part of it, because some of these vulnerabilities have been known by other parties and how they're hacking in and doing some of the things until someone figures it out and then patches it and puts that in. This one on the right is something that actually scares me. This is like one of the things that keeps me up at night. If you haven't subscribed to CISA.gov, the Cyber Information Infrastructure and Security Agency, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, branch of our government, or a department in our government, and I think under Homeland Security. And they track a lot of what's happening out there in the cybersecurity world and provide a lot of great information out there to the public, including alerts. And I get different alerts, and I subscribe to all of them. These are industrial control system advisories. So what these things actually do, I don't know. I could go in and look at them and see what they are. I don't know if these control a dam or a power plant or, some security. So who knows what these are. And you may have some of these. You may be impacted by some of these. I don't know, either this or maybe one of your business partners is. And then there's a whole series of alerts for all the ones that come for Windows and Microsoft and Google and Microsoft, Apple and all those other ones. But these are coming. I get these every week. This is just what came this week. These advisories are coming weekly on different categories. So it's just a constant barrage of new threats and new things to then take action on. And it's just not all automated to deal with it. It takes something. We're getting back to ransomware. This is the kind of the grand big daddy thing of what people really get scared about on a number of levels. One is it's very costly, and the other is it's very time consuming. So it's time consuming in both time, it's costly in terms of time and money. Now this screen is very quaint in that it's an old capture of a screen from an early version of, I think this was WannaCry or something like that. I don't remember which ransomware this was. It was early. If you know why it's quaint, because if you look down at the bottom where it tells you how to get Bitcoin, it says send $300 worth of Bitcoin. Now, your requests are coming in at tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars when they've got you or feel like they've got you. But this is kind of what happens with ransomware. So someone does something, right? Somehow they get into your system, and we'll get into some ways of how that can happen. And now your systems are infected. And someone comes in and sees a pop-up like this. And it's scary. And it's designed to be scary. It's designed to get your blood pumping. It's designed to get your brain activated like you are being chased by a bear. It's got a clock going down with time. It's got very friendly though. Hey, oops, we're sorry, your files have been encrypted. How do I do this? What do I do here? Walks you through their customer service because it's a challenge to get money to hackers overseas. So they need some ways to do it, and the cryptocurrency really enabled a lot of that. Made that more powerful for them, easier. But regardless of what you think about crypto and its uses, this is one way it gets used. And in the end, you just have to hope you can recover. You have to hope that because what happens with ransomware is your data is no longer available to you. Remember, in that confidentiality, integrity, and availability, it locks your data up, locks it tight in a vault. And even though it's still on your systems, it's all encrypted in a way that you can't get at it anymore unless you can recover, or unless you pay them the ransom and they'll give you the keys to your data. You hope they do. They are a business. You hope they're ethical hackers. They don't, if they get a reputation for not, because there are gangs behind this, ransomware gangs. If they get a reputation for not delivering on the, sending back the baby, then, people aren't going to pay the ransom anywhere. But they also have another trick that they do now, because a lot of people are getting wise and have better backup and disaster recovery solutions where they can kind of thumb their nose at them. Now what they're doing is what's data exfiltration, meaning they're taking copies of the data off-site. So not only they got your data locked up, they've got full copies off-site, and they're threatening to release it. And it may or may not be a big deal for you if they release it, depending on what your business is. It may be a big deal. It could be your sales database. It could be, trade secrets. It could be HR related information. There's all kinds of stuff that can happen with that. And they're going to threaten to expose that even if you don't recover. So you're going to kind of want to know what to deal with around that. Who's actually doing it? Who the heck knows? Some cases they find out. In some cases, you're just never going to know, because it's so easy to do and so easy to be anonymous with it that it's really hard to track. And a lot of times it's overseas, and you've got different issues with law enforcement, and at some point it just doesn't become worth it. It could be literally, this stuff is so easy. It could be the script kiddie. It could be somebody sitting in a coffee shop in China or somewhere in Africa or Russia or anywhere. It could be United States, and they're just online anonymously attacking you. There's malicious insiders. That's a real thing. That's where you've got people internally to your organization that are going to do something malicious. We don't like to think about it. And it does happen. People leave a company and sometimes they take things or doesn't go well. There is organized cybercrime. Those ransomware gangs, that's really happening. And they're really well organized, like unbelievably well organized. You got hacktivism. So when you hear about some of the bigger hacks that are happening against other organizations, there was a lot of uptick in hacking that was going on as Ukraine and Russia got further into their war, and people were attacking the US and people were attacking Russia and Ukraine, a lot of that kind of stuff. Some of that also is state sponsored, and you get cyber terrorism. You get the, just doesn't make it so easy these days that it almost doesn't make a difference, because everybody, you always think about what's somebody's motive. Everybody on here has got a motive, whether it's vengeance or social justice or survival or cash or whatever it is. So you might also hear them called as malicious actors. And they're working together. They are subspecializing. It's crazy. It is, in order for someone to get ransomware on your computer, they first have to exploit your systems. So it's kind of like two hacks. The first hack is to exploit your systems to get in, to be able to install the ransomware. And then there's the actual installation of ransomware and then executing on the whole ransom process. Those are kind of two distinct skills, and not everybody likes to do both of those. So you actually have people specializing in the exploit and then selling the exploit to ransomware people. So they're buying the exploit to get in and then doing the ransomware. Also, the ransomware has gotten so easy, it's now showing up as like a service, like just like you pay for Netflix, or just like you pay for any of the cloud services you're now using, Microsoft 365 or anything. They have ransomware as a service set up where you get a pay with a credit card, you give them a target, and they'll attack, and then you can reap the rewards. So it's trivial, and they're working together. You know, it's a form of capitalism. You know how these industries are springing up and subspecialties and all that. So again, getting worse, not better. This is also another thing we always have to watch out from the point of security. It used to be that a security breach would be known, and then you could test and patch your systems, and there was some time to deal with it. And those days are gone. Sometimes you get a little advance notice, and sometimes you don't, because that's the idea of the 0 day means it is a active attack and there's no patch for it. It's an unknown breach. It does not have one of those CVE numbers we talked about before. Suddenly it's a mad scramble. Are you impacted? Are you using one of those devices or one of those pieces of software that is vulnerable? And are you vulnerable? And are you already compromised? Or are you about to be compromised? And if you haven't been yet, how do we know that? And are there any mitigations we can do? You know, sometimes there's a patch suddenly available. Sometimes it's, no, batten down the hatches. There's no patch yet. Shut this system down, shut this component down, block it until we can figure out how to make this happen. So that's happening right now. There is a vulnerability that just got disclosed for Android phones, some of the Google Pixel and a number of the Samsung, and I believe they have patches out right now, but not every vendor has it because it's got to come from the manufacturer. And there is such a high CVE that Google created an exception to its own rule, because Google does its own security research, and it lets these companies know, and it gives them 90 days to fix it. And if they don't, they disclose it. They actually create an exception in the 90-day. I just heard about this today. And because this is so serious that if you know what you're doing, and once this thing is actually discovered, because people are actively working to figure out how to discover it right now and how to attack it, that you can just call somebody's number, and if you can take over their phone. That's kind of what the current thing is. So this is almost like a 0 day thing. So mitigations is they've got some things like turn off Wi-Fi calling and a couple other components. So check your phone if you're a Samsung user, see if you're impacted. There's some other brands. You know, listen to me here first and then go do that. But you know, that's like a 0 day thing. And then suddenly it's stop, drop, and roll. You got to like, what do we have here? Are we impacted? How do we respond? How do we roll out the mitigations? If you have 30 phones in your company that, you know, people use, and suddenly you have to be concerned about security, suddenly it upends everybody's day. So I've talked a lot about kind of the overall security, and there's a concept called the chain of trust with security, because all of these things rely on other things, right? Nothing sits in as an isolated component. We're all tied in so many different ways, and that's what these different vulnerabilities are. And suddenly, where you thought you had a solid steel link, suddenly you got some shoelaces and chewing gum holding your systems together, or some vulnerability, and that's where it is. And then you have to be right 100% of the time, because you're under constant attack. The emails, the attacks against your firewall, all these vulnerabilities coming, the patching, the updating. Do not walk out of here under any other illusion than you are, not illusion, other reality that you are under constant attack. Now, thankfully, there's a lot of mitigations, and some people are more susceptible than others, but it's just a matter of not if, but when and how bad. That's the way we look at it. You just have, no one can be right 100%. We're all human beings. It's just an unattainable goal. So today you're going to hear more blind spots, and these are just things that you didn't know. But once you know about them, now we really want you to get into action on them, or not, but have it be a choice, not because you just didn't know. My goal here today is to enlighten you and have you discover any blind spots you've got, and hopefully come away with a sense of power and how to deal with them. But you're going to have to listen up, because security is a process, not a product. Security is a process, not a product. People keep thinking, I bought this, we go to meetings with customers. Well, what is your security product? What do you use for this? We've got all that, right? But it's not just that. It's who's doing it. It's how they're managing it. It's how they're setting up. Because if you look at all those security vulnerabilities that I showed you before, some of them are for security products. There's vulnerabilities in those, in VPNs and firewalls and all of that. So, and there's also misconfigurations that can happen there. So it's not just about, like, I love the example of a lock. Does a lock on your door give you security? No, the lock does not give you security. It provides the opportunity of security if you take the action of turning it, deadbolting, and then jiggling it, before you walk out to make sure it's locked. It's that process that actually is the part that's secure. You engaged it, you tested it, and hopefully you sized it for what your needs are for your house. So it's a process. And one of the things we talk about here a lot is best practices. There are just these best practices with security. And, you can get in the argue with the nuance of some of these or the order of some of these, and some of these you've heard about, but there's always more to dive into with these. And so we focus on a lot of best practices here. And one of the things you want to get is, if you're going to uncover blind spots, you've got to do the work of understanding what you've got. Because the blind spot, part of the blind spot is the not knowing of what you've got in place and whether it's vulnerable or not. And so we recommend some kind of a security assessment. There's different ways of going about it. There's lighter ones, there's heavier ones. We're starting to see customers get these requests from some of their business partners or from their cyber liability insurance. So you may be requested to produce a vulnerability report at some point. But the idea is you want to go through and just look at what you got. Let's look at your systems. Let's see what's out there. Let's understand your assets. Let's understand your data. What is there? Look at what there is to protect. Look and see how it's being protected. See if it matches your needs. And then how do you kind of monitor and deal with that going forward? But, you can only protect what you know you're protecting. And if you don't know, it may not be protected. You may have compliance needs. I talked about cyber insurance, business contracts. We have clients, some law firms that work with corporate customers. Those corporate customers are saying, hey, you represent us. You need to be, and we've got some confidential data that you're working on here. Show us you're up to snuff security-wise. Because if you're working on our data, we have to prove, going through the same exercise of their confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and their own security assessments. Hey, we have a risk. We have our customers' data over by your law firm. So how are you protecting it? It's that kind of thing. You take credit cards, there's compliance. If you deal with health information, there's HIPAA. You do business in the European Union. If you're defense, there's a lot of different things. You may have stuff in contracts, just, contracts you're generally signing. You're starting to see little clauses show up about, I will protect my systems with firewalls and antivirus and all that. So you want to know what it is, if you've got any compliance needs, because that is also part of the security assessment, not just looking at your systems from best practices, but looking at your systems from best practices towards a specific compliance. Check your liability insurance. I cannot believe how many customers we go into and prospects, and I'm talking to the business owner, and they are just not engaged around cyber insurance. We got a lot going on. I'm telling you, it's not if, but when and how bad. And if you've got to if you have a serious incident, it's going to be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars easy. it really can get up to speed that quickly. If you need the insurance for that, you're going to have it. So you want to check and make sure you've got it and that you're following what it says. Because in some cases now it's not just saying, hey, we're going to protect you. It's saying we're going to protect you as long as you have endpoint detection and response software on your systems, as long as you're doing patches and updates on a regular basis, as long as you're doing this and that. And some of the things we're talking about today, they're starting to require those, or they're jacking up your premiums, because they know they're going to have a higher payout. It only makes sense. Their risk is higher. So if you have not done that, please get in contact with your insurance agent today. It's pretty common. It used to be a kind of a unique conversation. A lot of people are pretty practiced at it now in terms of having it. There's some that are better than others, but the main thing is to call somebody, get it going here. And if you've been a while, you want to check and make sure that the coverage amounts meet what you need. Because in terms of time, if it's bad, and you're not fully prepared, like I said, it can be very costly very quickly. All right. Like I said, not if, but when and how bad. You want to prepare for the worst. You want to make sure that you have, when you think about a disaster, and there's different kinds of disasters out there, how are you going to operate? How are you going to run your business? Simple example is that, diner that's been in that same location for 50 years, third generation. You've been going there since you were a kid, and you go there and suddenly, they switched from the writing up the guest checks by hand to they got new iPads and all that kind of thing. And you go in there and you're placing your order. And then one day you show up there and they're like, oh, iPads are down. And they go into their drawer and they pull out the old guest checkbook. And they say, okay, what do you want, honey? 2 eggs, scrambled, bacon, burn it. Great. Take it in the bank, Hank. 2 eggs, burn it, whatever. And that's their business continuity plan. Like, they can operate that way. Now, they may have a challenge depending on what the issue is, taking credit cards and such, but they can sort of operate. And we encourage you to think about, how are you going to operate when your systems are down? And you want to be looking at, like, really, what does that look like? Because sometimes it's down for minutes or hours. It could be down for days or weeks for a variety of reasons. So you want to be thinking about that. And there's a process for that we'll share. And then while you're working, while you're operating your business, and however you're continuing your operations while the disaster is going on, we're now in disaster recovery mode, getting your systems back up and running, depending on what it is. And it could be, restoring servers. It could be rebuilding things. It could be bringing you up in the cloud. It could be like something completely out of your control. You could be using a cloud service and they're down and you're just waiting. So they do whatever they're doing on the inside to get up and running, and you have nothing you can do about it. So whatever that disaster recovery looks like, that's how long you want to make sure your business continuity plan can last. Because if your disaster recovery plan takes 8 hours to get back up and running, you want to make sure you can operate for 8 hours. If it takes 3 weeks, you want to make sure you can be up and operate for 3 weeks. Disasters. This was Joplin, Missouri, before and after a tornado. Now this is a little bit older, 2011, people have more things in the cloud and such, but people still have servers and workstations and security systems and all kinds of stuff that they count on technology-wise, even more so since 2011. All the stuff that's now driven by the technology, all the HVAC systems and all of that. And in one fell swoop, that happened. So, there's a tragedy there that I don't want to step over in terms of people's lives, but we're here talking about technology today. And if you had a server in that area, you might be in a world of hurt. So people move to the cloud, which is great. Move things to the cloud. It makes a lot of sense to be moving to the cloud. But we want you to understand what the cloud really means. Because for some people, it means they can I should be on video right now. I'm doing that hand slapping thing, like I can wipe my hands of this. They've got my back on everything. And it just is not true. It's not true by their actions. It's not true by their contracts with you, their terms of service. This is a shared responsibility model world we're in now. And this is a very similar, this is Microsoft's chart, but it's the same with Google and Salesforce to one level or another, pretty much everything. So even over on the cloud, that's that SaaS, SaaS, software as a service. That's like a full cloud solution, right? Nothing on your side except a web browser. And you're like, I'm in the cloud, thank goodness. You're still responsible for your information and data. You're still responsible for all your devices. You're responsible for all your accounts and identities. And you're partially responsible for the whole identity and directory infrastructure. But 100% responsible for your information and data, always retained by you. So you want to just get clear about that. That might be a blind spot for some of you. You might be thinking, oh, I'm in the cloud. I don't have to worry about it anymore. There's some benefits to being in the cloud for certain things you don't have to worry about, but all the same things that can befall you not being in the cloud, befall the cloud. Like a fire at OVH data center in 2021. OVH is like Europe's equivalent of Microsoft 365 or AWS or Google, all the big cloud hosting where they host these big data centers full of servers and where all your data is. And this is, you know, if you're using some cloud service that isn't like Microsoft or Google, they've probably, and they're using the cloud, they've probably got it in something like an OVH or Amazon, you know, and they're hosting it too. They're moving to the cloud. But it still has to be designed right. If they've got everything sitting on these, there's nothing that prevents them from putting a server and doing it and putting in this data center that burned down and not backing it up. Or backing it up to a different data center. You still need offsite backup. It's not automatic. People have to design these systems. And guess what? It costs more. Now you start getting into geo-redundant data centers in different locations and things like that. And suddenly the cost goes up. And well, it should if you want that level of protection. But this is a real thing that happened. Their batteries when it started on fire. Thousands of sites were impacted and some never recovered. So it happens. So this is basic business continuity planning. There's obviously a lot behind what this looks like, but you could sit down and just start to rough out a plan around this. Or if you talk to your IT provider, walk us through what some of these things mean. How do we get here? And you can kind of start to walk through this, but don't have it be a surprise. Well, you're never down for as easy as you want. Sometimes you're pleasantly surprised. Something happens and you're like, wow, we got up in only 4 hours or 8 hours. And you're like, that was great when you're expecting more. But sometimes you're down for longer because for whatever reason, and it's taking longer. Or even if your systems are in such a state where it's going to be a 12-hour recovery. For a lot of businesses, 12 hours is a long time. So how do you operate during that time? So let's see. I see a question here that popped up. Here, let's see, events each year. I'm going to grab some water here and read that question. One sec. Schedule multiple events a year in credit card are commonly used. Recently, we had a CC fraud. Yeah, I'd have to hear more about where the fraud is happening. It depends on where it is. If it's in some ways coming from, if you're talking about credit card fraud, if it's in some ways, there might be some, they have to hear more about it. I don't know if I have enough about what it is, but sometimes some of that fraud is just so outside your control. And especially around credit cards, that whole world of easily selling ransomware, there's a whole other business of selling credit card numbers and things like that. But yeah, feel free to follow up with me, Mickey. That wasn't a real full answer there. This is this important conversation I'm talking around disaster recovery. And it's a real simple thing. Like, when you really look at it. But you really want to make sure that this is no longer something that lives in your head as a this is what I'd like it to be, to it lives out with your IT provider, this is what it needs to be. So when the security event happens, if your server is down, if the cloud is down, if whatever it is, the clock starts ticking, minutes, hours, days, weeks, whatever, both directions. There's how quickly you get back up and running. That's your recovery time objective. And there's, if you have to go back in time for some reason, how far can you go back? Sometimes people have been in the system. If it's an attack, for bigger companies, they're saying they're in the systems for months before the actual attack happens. They got a foothold in, and they're kind of exploring what you've got and understanding your data and kind of mapping out their network and figuring out what your backups are to see if they can delete them and things like that. So they do their reconnaissance now, and that can be in there for a long time. And so you want to be able to look both directions. How quickly you're back up and running, and how far back can you go before it's a real problem? And some of you, I know, we still go into some places and they've got backups of their data for only like 7 days, and then they write over it again. That's your recovery time objective, 7 days. So it's your default policy. I'm sorry, your recovery point objective, 7 days is your recovery point objective by default if you only got 7 days of backups. And guess what happens? If your backups are bad for over 7 days, or somebody deletes something you don't know about for 7 days, or they're in your systems for more than 7 days, then that's it. Now you're in a whole different kind of recovery. So, you want to, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, much better place to be. And how quickly you want to be able to recover. You want to be knowing this up front. It is a very unwelcome, unmet expectation if you're not planning for it ahead of time. And then the goal in this is, once you've told your IT provider, which systems are important. Do you remember I said you're going to start looking at your systems and thinking about what matters to you, and you're going to get that security assessment because you're going to want to find out, make sure what your risks are, and understand what systems are you want to protect. And you're going to work on your recovery. Now that you know what those are, you're going to work on your disaster recovery plan and say, look, okay, now I understand my critical systems. I know what these are, and I want a recovery time objective of 8 hours, and I want an RP, a recovery point objective of 60 days. Okay, great. Now we put the system in, we put in this new backup system that manages all of that. How do we know it works? When you back up, you get a nice little green check mark or whatever the indicator is, says it backed up your server and all of that. And you can go in and you can restore some files and things like that. And some of them have even more sophisticated systems where they'll spin your backup up into the cloud and start it up as a virtual machine in the cloud and send you a snapshot. I mean, it's cool stuff, but that is distinct from actually bringing up your backup and bringing up your systems, assuming a disaster. What does it actually look like to know that the whole process works? All kinds of stuff happens. The geeky stuff happens, like network changes. You can run into licensing issues. There's a lot of unexpected things that can come up until you've really tested it. And it doesn't mean you can't recover. It just might mean that, the recovery didn't go smooth like you'd like. Or because of the nature of your systems, the recovery really is 8 hours, but the first time we did it, it took like 20 hours to figure it out. So the first thing you want to do is, we recommend this. This is a high priority for business owners. Have a disaster recovery test and playbook put together where we go through the process of mapping out which systems are important. How do you recover those systems in the event of a disaster? What does it look like? Who gets called? It's got numbers, for your insurance company, and it's like a in case of glass, in case of emergency, break glass kind of a book you pull out. But we've actually walked through the whole process of restoring your systems. So now it's not just a complete scramble. We're now executing a plan that we've planned for, and then periodically update it. So please do this. This is a really important thing. Don't just assume you've got good backups because the backups are greener because someone told you. Inspect. You want to know what this is. You want to know what you've got here. Because like I said, it may be a very unwelcome thing if your expectations are unmet. So this is kind of the rough plan. Again, it's pretty straightforward. Talk to your IT provider, but you want to say, show me my book, build me a book, show me my book, show me the proof that the book worked, show me my backups. And you know what that looks like for us when we do a disaster recovery test? I'll use an example. Let's say a client's got QuickBooks or something. We actually bring their server up into the cloud. We bring up another workstation, or we give them remote access to their cloud server while their other server's running, so we can do it while the rest of their systems are running without interrupting that. And they can actually log in and open up QuickBooks and verify. They can run reports, they can log in, they can run their last AR and make sure that the reports look good. You can actually execute a test plan and know that the systems are working. That's like a high space to be in, and that's what we really recommend. You also got to be patching your systems regularly. 70% of organizations that suffered a security breach cite a known vulnerability that went unpatched. This still happens. All those CVEs I showed you before, that whole list, that is either currently in the process of being patched, or there's already patches available, meaning that's like software updates. Your iPhone or Android phone has a software update and it's got to reboot, all of that kind of stuff. But some people avoid those, or they don't have them automatic, or there's times where it's very disruptive to do it, like if it's of your server. So it's more challenging to do. But Equifax did not do it. They had a front-end server as part of their customer complaint web portal that had a widely known vulnerability that had been patched way before, and Equifax never patched it. Equifax, this is the big data mining, what do they do? Credit reporting agency kind of a thing. And remember I talked about that chain of trust? So once they got into the web portal, they were able to leverage that attack to further attacks in the system to get all the way in to do what they did. But if they had just patched that portal, which in most cases, some people say, oh, I don't patch because it causes problems. And yeah, sometimes it does cause a problem. Sometimes it's a huge pain in the butt. But by and large, it works. And who are you to say don't patch the system because they're saying this is a huge security hole? You're just leaving yourself up to vulnerabilities. We get the complexities of patching, but maybe it's a necessary evil, whatever you want to call it, but you got to keep up with it. Two-factor or multi-factor authentication and best practices. This is enable 2FA and MFA everywhere. A lot of you, this used to be a more foreign concept. A lot of you are much more familiar with this now. You've hopefully got it on your email and your admin accounts and your banking and all of that. It is low-hanging fruit security. It is the easiest kind of security you can add. And yeah, there's some ways around it and there's some other stuff, but by and large, the biggest thing it protects you from is somebody getting your password. And if your password gets breached in some way, if you get phished, for example, you get that email that shows up that looks like, oh, wow, I'm supposed to give somebody my ID and password here for this new document for my HR enrollment coming from my HR manager. Only it's not, it's coming from some person sitting in a coffee shop in somewhere, China or something, and they're hacking in. And because you haven't got MFA on your system and you've given your ID and password, now they can now go log in to wherever they're going to try that account. So you want that MFA, you want it everywhere. You want it on your remote access, you want it on your VPNs. Go to your mobile phone provider, log into your Verizon account, your T-Mobile account, go in there and make sure that people can't go take over your phone, because guess what? You use your phone for a lot of this multi-factor. In some cases, it's getting things texted to you, a 6-digit code you have to type in. And there's a concept called SIM jacking, where people take over your phone and suddenly they're able to get your phone numbers. And I just told you about the other attack. So get the MFA enabled everywhere, every service, every cloud service. Do it everywhere, please. Colonial Pipeline had a compromised password, and if they had MFA, we wouldn't have had that attack. I don't know if you guys remember that from a couple of years ago. Pipeline attack, carrying fuel. They shut the whole pipeline down. That was business continuity. What's the business continuity plan for a pipeline that is not pumping and flowing oil? Like truckloads, I guess. I have no idea. Like they were down for 7 days, the pipeline. But if they had multi-factor authentication on that password, they wouldn't have been able to get in. Simple as that. So your people got to know what's going on. Your people are part of your training, your security awareness team. They're part of your neighborhood watch. They're part of we all have anti-spam systems. We've all got a lot of these technologies that I've been talking about that are more sophisticated to try and catch these alerts and catch the problems when they come through. And yet they're all still coming through in one way or another. So, and these systems have the best artificial intelligence and machine learning and crowdsourced and blah, blah, blah. And it's still coming through. And some of it, when you look at it, you're like, wow, how did that even get through? That really looks like obviously someone's trying to phish me. They're trying to get my ID and password. Train your team. Keep them alert. Establish your neighborhood watch. Make sure people know if one person's getting attacked at your company, it's likely other people are getting attacked. And make no mistake, it's an attack. It may be a random attack. They may have just emailed out, 1 million people. It may not be directly targeted at you, but you're still under attack. Train up your soldiers, train up your team here, to see something, say something, let people know. And that's even more important as people work remotely. It used to be people just shout over the partition or in the break room, or they'd walk in, be walking past, oh, by the way, I got phished, watch out. How are they doing that when they're at home? You got to remind them. Spread the word when things are happening. Because the phishing, this is where they're sending you that stuff, that HR email that looks like it's coming from your HR department that's not really, trying to give you information, trying to get you to give information, your ID, your password, other personal information. They try and con you, and they're really good at it. They're really, really good at it. Or maybe we're just really bad at it. Whatever you want to say. Maybe that's the nature of human being is, the getting conned, right? We're always in fear of being conned and always watch longing for the conned, and yet, damn it, we all get conned in one way or another. And all it takes is a weak moment. It's not like any of us have like stressful lives that we're dealing with work and clients and issues at work and family issues and health issues and parent issues and society issues and blah, blah, blah. And we're exhausted and all of that. This is like even being like up to snuff in your A game. And some of these things are hard to not click on sometimes, because sometimes they look really real. So anyway, the bottom line is it's all up to you. So keep more getting trained. Print this off, put it next to your computer, put it in the break room. If anything, just a reminder. Just, hey, oh yeah, I should be looking at some of these red flags. Because it's still happening. It's amazing, some of the stuff that comes to us that somebody clicked on, and we're like, okay, this looked not bad, but this was here, this was here, this was here, not just trying to understand what, and as far as, we always want to debrief afterwards. What were the lessons learned? And in some cases, it's more training. So, again, it's up to you guys. So anytime it involves payment, because for a lot of people, it's all about the money. So, yeah, Denny, you're going to get a copy of the social engineering red flag cheat sheet. You're going to get a survey at the end, Denny, along with all the rest of you. And you complete the survey and you'll get a copy of the presentation along with a link to the video. So it's all about the money. And this is where you want to watch. If you are targeted, you might be targeted because you're the CFO, the controller, if you're listed on the website. Sometimes they're doing that, sometimes they're not. But how hard is it to go on the web and say sell me a marketing list of CFOs and give me their email addresses. It's not hard. In fact, we'll give you the first 1,000 for free to try out our service. This is not hard stuff. You may not be targeted in that sense. You might just be targeted in the sense that someone knows you're the CFO. So anyway, anytime there's money involved, just verify it. If it's an email, don't click on the link in the email, call up. Did you mean to send this? Was this real? Is this the correct wiring number? Sometimes they're in the system already and they're manipulating the email. So you're getting an email that looks like your normal wire transfer instructions, only somebody in the middle changed the instructions of where it goes to. And now the money is about to be disappeared fast. So you want to be watching for this, and watch for your clients too. We had a client that unfortunately got hit with one, and some of their clients acted on it. Some did not, which is good, but do yourself a favor too. Be suspicious for your partners. If you see something that looks like, why would they be sending this? This looks strange. Let them know too. And let's all be good citizens that way. It doesn't hurt to ask, but always call up the numbers, call, ask, verify, read it off. Is this really what you meant to send? And make sure this is part of your onboarding for new employees. Everyone should get this education regularly, and make sure you don't skip the new people. There's lots of other blind spots out there. There's just no shortage of ways people can get attacked. Thankfully, with a side effect of COVID is we're all very familiar with QR codes and scanning menus and things like that. Well, those QR codes are nothing difficult to make. There's millions of websites, not millions, there's sites out there that you can go to where you can just type in an address and it'll generate a QR code for you. You could print off labels and put them anywhere, and people and send their phones to any link anywhere. If someone dropped a flash drive in your parking lot with David and Zoe's precious memories of their wedding, someone's going to plug it in, almost certainly. Or a rubber ducky, the adorable rubber ducky that someone leaves at a trade show on the table, and someone grabbed a few of them, loaded them up with software, and put them back on the trade show table. You just gotta watch out for stuff. I mean, some of it's very rare and random, fortunate, but it happens, and you just never know. So, but how many of you work from home stuff, right? You're letting your employees use their home computers. How are those managed? How's their home network managed? What about your website? A lot of the websites now are attacks too. You might have your marketing site set up on there. You've got your WordPress site, and you've got your WordPress site tied into your CRM, and your CRM's tied into your email system. And your website can get attacked. If your WordSite's, WordPress or Drupal or any of these other platforms, guess what? There's CVEs for those all the time. So you want to make sure, and there's misconfigurations, and then there's all the website plugins and things people put in their websites. Yeah, it's a huge vector. So you want to be looking for that. Password managers and secrets. There's a lot of new technologies coming out that are moving away from passwords, which is really great, and hopefully being done well. And we're still going to be in the world of passwords for a while. So however you're storing your passwords, there's a few things. First of all, you want to store them securely. Obviously, it's not so bad to write them down. Just don't put them on a Post-it note on your computer. Put in a book somewhere that's secure and not obvious. Or store them in a password manager. But the big thing is avoid the reuse. Some of you are still reusing passwords for your email as the same password for your Amazon, as the same password for your bank. And guess what happens if a password's breached and you don't have multi-factor on? They're just going to go try that password everywhere. You want to have good, hard to guess passwords. So a lot of these password management systems have generators out there to help you create those passwords and store them. This is a nice thing. You can use it in your business. So you might have some systems where maybe it's like the 401k management, and there's only like one password you share between two people. You can share passwords with this, and if they leave or die, you can get the password back. And do yourself a favor for your family. This is the one where personal. use one of these things in your real life for outside of work. And there have these emergency modes where you can give somebody emergency access. So mine is set up that I think it's 24 hours, maybe, or 12 hours. If my wife requests access to my password database, I'll get an email. And if I don't respond to that email within 24 hours, it'll assume that I'm, dead or in a coma or something like that. And she needs access to my passwords. Hopefully she didn't make me dead or put me in a coma. That's so funny. But anyway, that's like a TV show. But and nevertheless, it's a real blessing for people when they pass on to not have people have to figure out how to deal with this, especially if it's an unexpected passing. Because you're trying to deal with their social media accounts, you're trying to deal with their banking, all of that stuff. And when you don't have the passwords and they've got MFA and all that, it's a big problem. So guard your secrets, best practice. We're running short on time here a little bit, so I'm going to breeze through. We only got a few more slides left. Encryption, decryption, you just want to know when you need to do it or not. There's times where, that gets into that world of confidentiality. If the data, if you get victimed of ransomware and the ransomware people exfiltrate your data, if that data is not encrypted, then they have access to the data. If they exfiltrate the data and it is encrypted, then they don't have access to the data. Now you've won the game in that world. Now there's some systems that are very challenging to encrypt and decrypt, and there's a lot of systems that are so old that it's almost not even a possibility. So you got to really look, but there might be areas in compliance or ways where you want to start doing this now, especially if you're sending anything confidentially via email or you're moving data around on flash drives or hard drives or among the cloud. So you just want to know where you're required to do it. In some cases, you're required by compliance to do it. Least privilege is another concept here. It used to be back in the day, everybody was an admin on their systems and they could do everything. Now you don't want to do that. Now you want only the admins, the administrators to be administrators, and they're only administering when they need to administer, but their day-to-day accounts do not have administrative privileges. You're setting up your security with layers of roles and people, so not everybody can do everything. But it also makes sense in the business when you're organizing files from a prediction of protecting yourself. One of the things you can protect yourself with ransomware is whoever gets the ransomware is the person whose ever privileges are as the person that can do the attacking. So if the person who is your salesperson and they're the salesperson who got the ransomware and they start to go out and it starts to infect the systems on the network, if the salesperson does not have access to the finance folders because you've restricted privilege because they don't need access to the finance folders, then the finance folders might be safe. You also want to do least privilege around giving people access to your network. A lot of places where this works, and the idea is to just start to separate this out. Don't give everybody access to everything, because that slows the spread. This actually happened in 2018. An HP all-in-one printer. Someone figured out how to attack a printer by sending it a malicious fax. Now you'd think printers, oh, well, it's on my network, but it's on the inside of my network as I print to it. So the only real connection to the outside world is through my fax line, which isn't on my network. No one could possibly attack us that way. Well, they did. They figured out a way to send a malicious fax, which allowed them to take over their printer, which is basically a computer that can print. And then they use it to leverage other attacks with Microsoft for further penetration into the network. So this stuff happens. If that printer was on had a principle of least privilege and it was on a different network, it might not have spread and might not have been a problem. That's why I give this example. So even devices on your network that could be an attack, you might want to look at how do we separate these things such that if one's attacked, it prevents the lateral spread. So there's a whole world of managed security services around all of these things. These are all the different technologies and solutions we use and response and ways to mitigate some of the things we're talking about. We're talking about disaster recovery. We have a service around it. Every IT provider's got some of these or is adding them or should be adding them. If you're not getting talked to about these, you may want to inquire about it or find out what's going on there, because some of this stuff is becoming table stakes, like, you know, not only for the big business, but for every business now. So these are the best practices. Again, if you complete our survey, you're going to get a list of all of this. You start to go through all of this and you do this stuff reliably. Put this on your calendar just to go review this slide with your leadership team or with your IT provider. Where do we stand? Where do we stand with this versus our gap and where we want to be? And you start to get your plan together. It's a journey. It takes some time. Some of it's really easy to do. Some of you have some low-hanging fruit, easy peasy security fixes out there. Some of you are more challenged. But it's a process. It's a journey. It's getting there along the way, and it's a commitment by the decision makers. So if they're not here, or you think they need to hear this conversation, or you're on some other organization, let's say you're on the board of directors somewhere, or you're in a nonprofit, or you want your people at church to hear this message or whatever, because I can easily just talk about all this as it relates to all your personal information as well. It's the same kind of concept. The idea is just to not just know it, because knowing this, if you walk away from here just knowing more, it just isn't going to make a difference. You're going to have to get an action on it. The actions where the fixes are, the actions where the relief is, the actions where the ability is to recover or avoid and be able to operate your business and do it happily and joyfully. Anyway, so that is our webinar. We went over here already a minute. I know I promised you some time for questions, so I'll stick around for another minute or two. Again, you can feel free to reach out. Fill out that survey, please. It's so important to give us your feedback. Follow us on social media. We love that too. We give a lot of good information out there about cybersecurity. And if you'd like to hear more about this in person, or you've got something you just didn't feel comfortable talking about publicly, reach out to me. Otherwise, thanks. Have a happy Wednesday. Enjoy yourself and take care.